That feeling of running in place isn't just in your head. You see it at the gas pump, the grocery store, and when your rent is due, it's the harsh reality of working harder than ever, only to watch your financial security slip away. For millions, the math just doesn't add up anymore. Wages are flat, but the price of everything else from housing to basic necessities keeps climbing. Credit card balances are soaring to new heights as people struggle to bridge the gap. This isn't about a lack of ambition. It's about a system where the rules have changed, and the rewards for hard work have vanished. If you feel like you're playing a game you can't win, you're not alone. Let's break down why this is happening. 10. The Great Decoupling. When your paycheck stops keeping pace. Let's be direct. The reason a growing number of people feel like they're on a treadmill to nowhere isn't a mystery. It's a mathematical certainty rooted in decades of wage stagnation. The core issue isn't just that things are more expensive. It's that the value of your labor is no longer translating into a better quality of life. For nearly half a century, the connection between productivity and pay has been severed. While corporate profits have soared to historic highs and the economy has expanded, the financial benefits have been overwhelmingly funneled upward, leaving the average worker's earnings to flatline. Consider this. After adjusting for inflation, the real median hourly wage in the United States has barely moved since the late 1970s. This isn't a slowdown, it's a standstill. Meanwhile, the cost of essentials has done the opposite. Since the year 2000 alone, overall consumer prices have jumped significantly, meaning every dollar you earn today has drastically less purchasing power. This slow-motion erosion of your financial stability is happening while the narrative often focuses on misleading indicators like small percentage raises. A 3% annual raise feels like progress until you realize that housing, healthcare, and childcare costs have all surged by double-digit percentages. You are actively losing ground while being told you're moving forward. This problem is compounded by subtle but significant shifts in the nature of work itself. The erosion isn't just in the dollar amount on your paycheck, but in the benefits that once provided a safety net. Overtime opportunities have been curtailed, stable full-time positions are increasingly replaced by contract or gig work with no benefits. And pension plans have become relics of a bygone era. For countless households, even with two full-time earners, the goal has shifted from building wealth to simply treading water. This isn't about a lack of effort. People are working longer hours and taking on more responsibilities than ever. But when every additional dollar earned is immediately consumed by inescapable costs, the motivation to strive for more begins to fade. It's a structural trap, and feeling exhausted by it isn't a personal failing. It's a rational response to an irrational system. 9. Designed for debt. The modern financial trap. The financial landscape for the average American has been reshaped into a system that seems designed to create and sustain debt. For millions, debt is no longer a tool for building a future but a permanent feature of their present, a heavy anchor dragging them down. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar mountain of household debt encompassing everything from student loans and credit cards to auto financing and medical bills. It functions as a hidden tax on aspiration. Before a young person even earns their first significant paycheck, they may be saddled with tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, a burden that dictates their career choices, living situations, and ability to save for decades. Credit card debt has become another normalized crisis. With interest rates frequently exceeding 20%, what starts as a way to cover an emergency expense can quickly morph into a suffocating cycle of minimum payments. The architecture of this system is punitive. A single late payment can trigger penalty fees and interest rate hikes, transforming a manageable balance into an insurmountable one. It's a mechanism that extracts the most from those who have the least. This isn't just about poor financial choices, it's about a lack of choices altogether. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, a car repair or an unexpected trip to the doctor doesn't just strain your budget, it forces you into high-interest debt that can take years to escape. This constant financial pressure has a profound psychological impact. The mental weight of owing money shapes every decision, big and small. You might stay in a job you dislike because the stability is necessary to service your loans. You delay starting a family, buying a home, or launching a business because the risk is too great. The perpetual stress of managing payments, tracking interest, and worrying about your credit score leads to anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. People aren't giving up because they're lazy. They're giving up because they feel like they're playing a rigged game where the house always wins. When your hard work only seems to enrich your creditors, the very purpose of that work comes into question. 8. The healthcare squeeze. When staying healthy bankrupts you, nowhere is the financial pressure on Americans more acute or more cruel than in the realm of healthcare. You are told to prioritize your health, yet the system is structured in a way that can financially ruin you for doing just that. The cost of medical care in the United States has spiraled out of control, consistently outpacing inflation and wage growth for decades. Even if you have what's considered good employer-sponsored insurance, you are not safe. The nature of coverage has been quietly hollowed out over the years. High deductible plans are now the norm, meaning you may have to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket before your insurance contributes a single cent. This creates a perilous situation where having insurance provides a false sense of security. A sudden illness, an accident, or the diagnosis of a chronic condition can trigger a cascade of co-pays, specialist fees, and prescription costs that quickly become unmanageable. It is a grim reality that medical issues remain a leading cause of personal bankruptcy. The problem extends beyond unexpected emergencies. The sheer cost of prescription drugs forces people into impossible choices every day. Do you afford the medication that keeps you healthy, or do you pay your rent? This dilemma isn't an outlier. It's a common experience for millions managing conditions like diabetes, heart disease, or mental health disorders. The most damaging consequence of this system is the widespread phenomenon of delayed care. Fearing a catastrophic bill, people avoid routine checkups, skip specialist appointments, and ignore worsening symptoms. A manageable issue can escalate into a life-threatening crisis, which ultimately results in far more complex and expensive treatment. The emotional toll of this constant gamble is immense. It's a quiet stress that erodes your well-being, forcing you to live with pain or anxiety because the alternative is a financial abyss. This is not a system that promotes health, it's a system that monetizes illness. People are not losing hope because they lack resilience. They are being ground down by a healthcare apparatus that treats their physical and mental survival as a commodity. 7. The squeeze of shelter. When housing becomes a trap, the fundamental promise of a home, a place of stability and security, has been corrupted into a source of relentless financial pressure for a vast number of Americans. We can no longer talk about housing costs as just rent or a mortgage. It has become a complex and ever-expanding web of expenses that methodically drains household income, leaving little room for anything else. For decades, the cost of shelter has been on a steep upward trajectory, far outpacing the slow crawl of wage growth. Since 2010, for example, average rents have climbed at a rate that makes a mockery of typical pay raises, creating a structural deficit in the budgets of millions. This isn't just an issue in major coastal cities anymore, it's a nationwide crisis affecting small towns and mid-sized cities alike, where a lack of affordable housing stock forces people into a fierce competition for overpriced units. The problem is deeper than just the monthly check sent to a landlord. Utilities, once a predictable and manageable expense, have transformed into a volatile and significant financial burden. Fluctuating energy prices, aging infrastructure projects, and shifting regulatory landscapes mean that consumers are bearing the brunt of soaring costs for electricity, gas, and water. A brutal summer heat wave or a frigid winter cold snap can now trigger utility bills that rival a car payment, adding hundreds of dollars in unexpected costs to a budget that is already stretched thin. For homeowners, the squeeze is just as intense. Property taxes often increase at a clip that dwarfs salary growth, and homeowners' insurance premiums have been skyrocketing, creating a situation where the cost of simply maintaining ownership becomes a crushing weight. Beyond these primary expenses lies a world of hidden costs that quietly bleed families dry. Application fees, exorbitant security deposits, mandatory renter's insurance, and non-refundable move-in fees create high barriers to entry. For homeowners, homeowners association (HOA) fees can rise unpredictably, adding another layer of financial strain. Many landlords now pass on costs for services like trash collection, landscaping, and even routine maintenance directly to tenants, further inflating the true cost of housing. When you add it all up, a rental advertised at $1,500 a month can easily cost $1,800 or more in reality. This constant draining pressure forces people into a state of permanent financial defense, where every dollar is already spoken for. The ability to save for an emergency, invest in the future, or even consider a career change becomes a distant fantasy. The dream of a home has been replaced by the reality of housing as a financial prison, and for many, the fight to keep a roof over their head is the very hardship that makes them question the point of the fight itself. 6. The erosion of hope. The psychological toll of financial precarity. While the numbers surrounding debt, wages, and living costs tell a stark story, they don't fully capture the most corrosive force at play, the systematic erosion of hope. This isn't about having a bad day or a tough month. It's about the psychological exhaustion that comes from living in a state of perpetual financial uncertainty. When every paycheck is consumed before it even arrives, and every small step forward is immediately erased by a new expense, a sense of learned helplessness begins to take root. You start to believe that your efforts are futile, that the system is designed for you to fail. This feeling is not just an emotional response, it's a documented psychological phenomenon. Sustained financial stress has been shown to diminish cognitive function, making it harder to plan for the future, solve complex problems, or think creatively. Your brain becomes locked in a short-term survival mode, focused only on getting through the next day or the next week. This psychological tax is what quietly convinces millions of people to scale down their dreams until they are barely recognizable. The ambition to start a business, go back to school, or pursue a passion is replaced by the far more immediate need to simply make it to Friday. The risk of failure feels too catastrophic when you have no safety net. So you settle. You stay in a job that drains your soul because it offers a steady, if inadequate, paycheck. You remain in a town you dislike because the cost of moving is insurmountable. This slow, quiet surrender is not a character flaw. It's a predictable outcome of a system that punishes ambition and rewards mere survival. The shift from aspiring for a better life to simply enduring the current one is a tragedy playing out in millions of households. The consequences of this collective despair ripple outward, impacting more than just individual bank accounts. People who are emotionally and financially exhausted withdraw from their communities. They have less energy for social engagement, volunteering, or civic participation. Friendships and family relationships become strained under the constant pressure. This social fragmentation weakens the very support networks that are crucial for resilience, leaving individuals more isolated and vulnerable than ever. You may feel alone in your struggle, ashamed that you can't get ahead. But this is a shared experience, a systemic condition affecting a huge portion of the population. The ultimate reason so many are giving up is not just the external economic pressures, but the internal death of the belief that a better future is possible. When hope is gone, the motivation to keep fighting evaporates with it. The gig economy illusion. More work, less security. The rise of the gig economy has been sold as a story of freedom, flexibility, and entrepreneurial spirit. In reality, for a growing number of Americans, it has become a trap of instability, exploitation, and profound insecurity. The promise of being your own boss dissolves quickly when you realize you're at the mercy of an algorithm, competing with thousands of others for low-paying tasks with no guarantee of future work. This isn't a choice made from a position of strength. For many, it's a path taken out of desperation, when traditional employment fails to provide a living wage or disappears entirely. The result is a workforce stripped of the foundational protections that once defined a job. No guaranteed hours, no employer-sponsored health insurance, no paid sick leave, and no retirement benefits. You are not an employee, you are a disposable asset. The defining feature of this new economy is its inherent unpredictability. A significant portion of freelance and gig workers report that they cannot accurately predict their income from one month to the next. This financial volatility makes basic life planning impossible. How can you sign a lease when you don't know if you'll make enough to cover rent in 3 months? How can you build an emergency fund when your income fluctuates wildly? Taking a day off for illness or a much-needed mental health break becomes a terrifying financial calculation, as there is no paid time off to fall back on. To mitigate this risk, many are forced into a frantic juggle, balancing multiple platforms and gigs, driving for a rideshare service, delivering food, and completing online microtasks, all in a desperate effort to piece together a sustainable income. This constant hustle is not empowering, it is utterly exhausting. Furthermore, the precarious nature of gig work has begun to infect traditional employment. The lines have blurred as employers increasingly treat their full-time staff with the same lack of loyalty once reserved for contractors. The expectation of constant availability, the demand for unpaid overtime, and the threat of sudden layoffs with little or no severance create an environment where no one feels secure. You can have a stable job and still feel like a gig worker, perpetually anxious about your position. This erosion of security and loyalty fundamentally changes a person's relationship with work. When your labor is treated as a temporary commodity and your employer shows no investment in your future, the motivation to go above and beyond disappears. You begin to question the purpose of your effort. You're not building a career, accumulating benefits, or securing a future. You're just spinning your wheels to survive another day. This is how the belief in upward mobility dies. It's how you arrive at a place of resignation, accepting that survival is the only goal left. 4. The hidden tax of daily life. Beyond the inflation headlines. Official inflation numbers often feel like a distant echo of the financial reality people face every day. While headlines might report a modest percentage increase, the actual cost of non-negotiable items, the things you simply cannot go without, has been climbing at an alarming rate. This is the story of inflation's hidden bite, a relentless pressure that quietly erodes financial stability in the areas that matter most. Consider the grocery bill, which has ballooned far beyond the general rate of inflation. Staple items like eggs, meat, and bread have seen dramatic price hikes, turning a routine shopping trip into a stressful exercise in budget management. This isn't just about a few luxury items costing more. It's about the foundational cost of feeding a family becoming a significant financial strain. This trend extends to other essential services. The cost of childcare has become so exorbitant that for many families, one parent's entire salary is consumed by it, forcing impossible choices between a career and raising children. Similarly, the costs associated with skilled labor for home maintenance, fixing a leaky roof, servicing an HVAC unit, or repairing a major appliance have soared. These are not discretionary expenses, but urgent needs, and their rising costs leave households vulnerable to unexpected financial shocks. Compounding this issue is the subtle but pervasive phenomenon of shrinkflation, where manufacturers reduce the size or quantity of their products while keeping the price the same. That bag of chips is lighter, that bottle of juice is smaller, and that box of cereal contains fewer serving. You're paying the same or more, but for less product, a stealthy form of inflation that chips away at your purchasing power with every purchase. Digital necessities, from internet access to software subscriptions required for work or school, have also seen steady price creep, adding another layer of mandatory expenses to the monthly budget. This is the true burden of inflation, a constant draining pressure on the essentials of modern life that leaves people feeling perpetually behind, no matter how hard they work. The Great Disconnect. A crisis of institutional trust. A society functions on a bedrock of trust in its institutions to be fair, responsive, and accountable. When that trust disintegrates, people begin to feel powerless and alienated. A sentiment that is now pervasive across the United States. A profound sense of disconnection has taken hold, as millions of individuals feel that the systems designed to support them, government, banking, healthcare, and corporations, are either indifferent or actively hostile to their well-being. This isn't just a vague feeling of discontent, it is reflected in historically low levels of public trust in nearly every major institution. People see policies that seem to favor large corporations over small businesses and individuals, and they experience firsthand the bureaucratic mazes that make accessing help nearly impossible. This institutional failure is felt on a deeply personal level. It's the frustration of being denied a loan by an opaque algorithm with no human recourse. It's the despair of an insurance company refusing to cover a critical medical procedure based on a technicality. It's the feeling of being ignored when you try to navigate a backlogged government agency for desperately needed aid. In each interaction, the individual is treated not as a person but as a case number, an entry in a database. The rise of automated decision-making has only exacerbated this problem, removing human judgment and accountability from processes that have life-altering consequences. You can't reason with an algorithm or appeal to the humanity of a system that has none. When people repeatedly encounter these impenetrable walls, they eventually stop trying. They disengage from civic life, convinced that their voice doesn't matter and that the game is rigged. Why vote when politicians seem unresponsive to your needs? Why follow the rules when the powerful seem to operate by a different set? This erosion of faith is a dangerous precursor to societal decay. It fosters a sense of isolation and resignation, creating a population that no longer believes in the possibility of collective action or systemic fairness. When the fundamental contract between citizens and their institutions is broken, people are left to fend for themselves. This retreat into silence and apathy isn't a sign of weakness, it's a rational response to feeling abandoned by the very structures that are supposed to serve you. 2. The epidemic of isolation, broke and alone. One of the most insidious crises unfolding in America is not economic in the traditional sense, but it is deeply intertwined with financial hardship. It is the epidemic of loneliness. Decades of economic pressure, the shift toward digital interaction over genuine connection, and a culture that prioritizes overwork have left millions of Americans feeling profoundly isolated. The U.S. Surgeon General has declared loneliness a public health crisis, citing its health impacts as being comparable to smoking daily. This is not mere sadness, it is a chronic state of disconnection that corrodes mental and physical health, making every other struggle feel insurmountable. As community bonds have frayed, the number of close friends the average American reports has dwindled, leaving people without the vital support networks needed to navigate life's challenges. Financial precarity and loneliness create a toxic feedback loop. When you are struggling to make ends meet, you have less time, energy, and money for the social activities that build and maintain relationships. You turn down invitations, withdraw from community groups, and isolate yourself out of shame or exhaustion. At the same time, this isolation makes it harder to cope with financial stress. With no one to talk to and no community to lean on, the burden becomes exponentially heavier. Social media, which once promised to connect us, has often had the opposite effect, fostering a culture of comparison and performative happiness that leaves people feeling more inadequate and alone than ever. This widespread isolation also has significant societal consequences. A disconnected population is a compliant one. People who feel that they are the only ones struggling are less likely to organize, demand change, or challenge a system that exploits them. The narrative of individual failure thrives in an environment of social fragmentation. The feeling of being broke and alone is a powerful force for demotivation. It's the final weight that can make a person give up. The human need for connection and belonging is as fundamental as the need for food and shelter. When that need goes unmet, the will to keep fighting can wither. People are not just quitting jobs, they are emotionally withdrawing from a society that feels cold and indifferent to their existence. The quiet surrender to loneliness is one of the most tragic symptoms of a system that is failing its people. 1. The collapse of purpose. When the why disappears, at the heart of every other struggle, the stagnant wages, the crushing debt, the soaring costs, the profound loneliness, lies a deeper, more existential crisis. The collapse of a shared sense of purpose. For generations, the American dream provided a clear why for the daily grind. The formula was simple: work hard, and you can achieve a stable, prosperous life, complete with a home, a family, and a secure retirement. This narrative, this promise, was the engine of ambition and resilience. But for millions today, that equation is broken. The goalposts have not just moved, they have vanished from sight. The home is an unaffordable fantasy, starting a family is a financially terrifying prospect, and retirement feels like a cruel joke. Without a clear and attainable destination, the effort itself begins to feel pointless. People are working harder than ever, often juggling multiple jobs, yet they are treading water or sinking. This is not just burnout, it is a form of spiritual exhaustion. When you pour everything you have into a system that offers no meaningful reward, the fundamental motivation to strive begins to die. Polls consistently show that for the first time in modern history, a majority of young people do not believe they will be better off than their parents. This is not simple pessimism, it is a rational assessment of their circumstances. They are asking the logical question, why should I sacrifice my health and well-being for a future that will never arrive? This loss of purpose is the ultimate reason millions are giving up. Humans are capable of enduring immense hardship if they believe there is meaning in their struggle. What they cannot endure is meaningless struggle. When your work serves no larger goal than to barely keep you afloat, and your contribution feels insignificant in the grand scheme of things, a profound nihilism can set in. People are no longer just financially bankrupt, they are becoming philosophically bankrupt. They have lost faith in the idea that their efforts matter. This is the quiet catastrophe unfolding across the nation. It is not about laziness or a lack of character. It is the predictable result of living in a system that demands everything and promises nothing in return. When a nation's why collapses, its people stop building for tomorrow. They simply try to survive today.